So I think we should start. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Professional Development Program. We have a terrific guest here today. We have Kerri McCullough Wood. She's a Senior Vice President of Teva. She's also on the Dean's Board of Advisors, and she's simply amazing. So I'm going to have her give some background on herself, and then we're going to have a panel discussion between the two of us. If at any time you want to ask Kerri a question, you could type it in the chat, you could type it in the Q&A, or you can ask to be promoted as a panelist, and you can ask Kerri your question live. So Kerri, the mic is yours.
So thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here with all of you and to have this opportunity to speak to you and answer any questions you may have and give you a little bit of insight on my leadership experiences. I've been actually with Teva for 21 years. I got my undergraduate degree from Boston College. I was a biology major, pre-medical health science minor, and decided after the fact, I had taken my medical school exams and everything, but I decided later upon graduation that I really wanted to start working and not be in school for the rest of my life. And when I realized that working was more important to me than school, I realized that being a doctor probably wasn't the right profession for me. So I ended up, through networking, actually getting this job at Teva 21 years ago, entry-level job, and have had a lot of great opportunities throughout my career at Teva to grow and develop. And, we'll talk about it a little bit here, I'm sure, through the discussion. I graduated from BC in 1999. I guess around 2005, I started my MBA, and I got my MBA in finance from Fairleigh. Our offices were on the Hackensack campus, so it was really convenient because I had been traveling a lot for work at that point in time. So it was like I would walk across the street and go right to school. I got my MBA in finance intentionally so because I was in the commercial sales and marketing arena. I had the scientific background and I wanted to round myself out with the financial component so that, at some point, hopefully I'll be the CEO of a company running the end-to-end business. So I think that's enough probably about a little bit about my background. And of course, I'd be happy to answer any other questions about myself.
And I have no doubt that someday you will be the CEO of a company. And I have it being recorded, so I will play it back. Okay, so my first question for Kerri is, how do you balance the business versus the science decisions?
It's a great question, and it's something that we're challenged with every day, especially working in pharmaceuticals, because there's so much innovation and creativity and great ideas that really are percolated right through different meetings and discussions and whatever may happen. But it's always important to understand what's the return on that investment, because you could spend years working on a new drug that never comes to the market, and what value is that ultimately to the patient? You have to balance what you think you can bring to the market, what you think you can bring to society versus in its what time period, right? So to make sure that you're also having the right business investment, because there's only so much money that you can spend. As you grow in an organization, you see that you really have to understand where to invest, how to invest, and be able to make those kinds of decisions, but understand all the critical parameters that would go into those decisions to enable you to make the best decisions. You don't always make the best decisions, right? At the time you believe you did, but probably most important is when you don't, doing a lessons learned after. So the next time you know how to make a better decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. How do you stay informed of challenges facing your organization?
So I believe it starts with a very strong leadership team. For me, everything's about the people and the relationships that are there. I can tell you this pre-COVID, I was flying almost 300,000 miles a year. What I didn't mention in my introduction, now that I think about it, is that I'm actually running two businesses for the Teva organization. I run the API commercial arm, and then I also run this business called Metis. They're both B2B businesses, which operate globally. Teva API commercial is truly global. We're everywhere around the world. And the Metis business is about 70 to 80% of their sales come from Europe, and the rest is in the international regions, not in the United States. So as such, I'm pre-COVID, I was traveling all the time. And there's something really important to connecting with people. And for me, it's been, at first it was nice because I got more time with my kids, the COVID situation, but now I feel really disconnected from the people that I work with, which is very difficult for me because once you build relationships with people and you have the trust, people are open with you and they share information with you. And I call it like the hallway talk, but you have the soft things that you experience when you go visit people, when you have dinner with people and you have lunch with people and you're just meeting with people. So just to answer your question more specifically, I think it's really important to have a strong leadership team and to have the alignment, trust, and collaboration across them. It's also important, as I mentioned, to have those strong relationships through the whole organization. I've always had what I call like an open door policy. I encourage people to reach out to me. I want people to feel comfortable with me and not feel like they're just giving me an answer because they feel like I have to because I'm an SVP at Teva. I have a very authentic style, and I think people appreciate that because I stand by my word. So they feel that I'm approachable in that respect. There's other tools you can use as a leader, right? There's surveys, there's anonymous reporting tools, and they're beneficial. But for me, I think the relationships and having that trust is the most important because you really understand what's going on and what the challenges are within the organization that you need to address.
That's awesome. I'm going to stop because Brianna has a question to ask you, and I just promoted her to a panelist. So Brianna, you have a very good question. Can you turn your camera on and ask it?
Hi, how are you? My name's Brianna. I actually tried to turn on my camera, but it's saying that I don't have permission to.
There you go.
Yeah, so I was going to ask because I know that you said, I'm sorry to cut you off so early, but I was
it's okay.
I was curious because you had mentioned that you had got in by someone you knew, I think you said. I'm not sure if I heard you exactly right.
You want to know the story?
Yes.
Not only do I want to know the story, but I also want to know, is it more like who you know versus what you know? Because I know that's what a lot of me and my friends who are graduating this year are really trying to figure out, I guess.
So I don't know the right answer to that question, right? I think it's all based on the individual and the individual's experience. But I'll tell you what happened with me. I was when I was younger, right, I was actually a lifeguard and I used to teach kids how to swim, right? So that was like what I did for my summer job. And I was sitting at the pool once I had decided, after I graduated from Boston College, and I decided I was going to, use my scientific knowledge and I wanted to get into pharma. Like it was that broad. I had no clue what I wanted to do. I said, I just need a job in pharma. And I was sitting at the pool talking to my neighbor who I happened to had taught her kids how to swim maybe, 5-7 years prior. And she said, oh, my brother's the president of this pharmaceutical company. Just send him your resume and tell him, you know me. So I was like, okay. So he, of course, called me in for an interview. And, to this day, he's still one of he was an amazing boss and a mentor to me to this day. But he says, I saw you graduated from Boston College. I figured you couldn't be so stupid. It was an entry-level job, so I gave you the job. So that was actually how it happened for me many, many moons ago. I try to give back. So, for example, somebody reached out to me through LinkedIn who's a BC grad. She got her master's at BC. And she messaged me and said, I saw you're a BC alum. Can I talk to you? I need career advice. And I said, sure, I'd be happy to help you, whatever I can do. Because a lot of people invested in me through my career and they saw my capability and potential. So I try to give back wherever I can now. And so when she called me, she asked for a lot of advice. And, I was kind of guiding her how to think about things and, what would fit for her. And I said, I have a few openings in my company. You can apply for the job. Actually, she ended up getting hired. She works for somebody, she works in my organization, but a few levels down. I didn't influence the decision at all. I just said, this is an individual who's looking for a job. She seems really motivated and intelligent. So I think the who helps, but I wouldn't say it's only that, because people, at the end of the day, you still need to interview and you still need to kind of like pass the interview, and people have to see that you're really a fit for that organization. They're not going to just hire you because so-and-so said to hire you, especially not in big corporations today. There's too many policies in place to prevent that from happening. But It's a little bit of both, I guess.
All right. Thank you so much for answering my question.
Sure. Good luck.
Thanks, Brianna. Just to carry on Brianna's conversation and, interviewing, what to you would help make these students stand out on an interview? What are some of the things that would help make them stand out?
It's a great question. And I think it's really important before you go into an interview that you do as much research as you can on that company. And I think there's so many tools today that didn't exist, when I was interviewing 21 years ago, like the internet and LinkedIn, where you can see if you have connections to these companies. And if you know somebody who knows somebody there, you can learn a little bit about the culture of the company and things where you feel that you could really fit for whatever reason it may be. Maybe you really admire their culture. It's a very entrepreneurial spirit and you really are an entrepreneur at heart. Because I think if you come into the interview, not only showing who you are and the knowledge that you have and how you can contribute, but also how you can connect to that company, I think it will engage them even more to want you to be a part of their team. I think it's important to connect with the people that are interviewing you, to try and find that common ground. Something that I've, part of my success throughout my career is that I try to see other people's perspectives also in discussions and hear where they're coming from. I started, in marketing and then in sales. So I guess part of it is from my kind of upbringing in my career. But if you hear the other person and they feel like they're being heard, they're going to connect with you more. And if they connect with you more, they're going to want to be a part of your team. They're going to want you to be a part of their team more. Absolutely. And one of the best questions you can ask is there anything that I didn't address or any concerns that you may have that I can further address before we end this interview, to show them that you want to make sure you completed everything with them and that nothing's left on the table as a question.
Awesome. Before we bring Sean up, because Sean has a question, I have one more question. So the
Sure.
opposite of that, is there anything that would be a deal breaker? Is there any one thing that would prevent you from hiring a person? Like if somebody is late, if there's a typo on their resume, is there anything to you that's a deal breaker?
Well, the sloppiness on the resume really irks me. I have to be honest. I don't know deal breaker, but to me, it's usually indicative of how I would see that their work is going to be. So for me, they have to have wowed me otherwise, and it really just be a mistake. Deal breaker for me is like integrity, compliance related issues. So if I feel like somebody's lying, if I feel like I don't know, anything that questions that, I don't want them as part of my team. Because there's just too much risk in it, and it's not my style, right? That's not, I don't promote that at all.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Sean, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Why not? One, thanks for coming in and talking with us. I work at J&J, and I've been in a consulting jobs for the very past 15 years or so. So what I'm interested in is some of the decisions that are made, especially with large pharma companies. A lot of it's driven by R&D, of course, but then there's also the commercialization and supply chain. I know that a lot of companies are starting to move from product driven to very service driven, and knowing that in some of these larger organizations, there's a little bit of, I wouldn't say competition, but R&D obviously drives a lot of the decision making and finances as well. But I'm also interested in how you guys integrate some of these other components, such as the commercialization component and all those things that we discussed. Is there a specific process that you guys use, or at least a process that you're working on? And I'd just be interested to hear your perspective on that.
What do you do for J&J?
I work at the J&J. It's internal consulting, so I'm part of the design studio there in New York.
Okay. We used to have one of those groups in Teva. They no longer have it, but that was a great asset that we had internally. So Teva is a generic drug company, so it's a little bit different than a J&J, but it's a larger size corporation. I really admire a lot of what J&J does and also what they do to develop their employees. They really bring it to a different level in terms of the internal rotation programs that they provide people, right? A company like Teva is not as robust as a company like J&J in that respect. We actually, being a generic drug company and having all of having to execute very quickly across all those different areas, right? We have, I would say, a lot of collaboration and connection across all of those groups within the company. I can't say what it's like to be at a J&J. I can only say from an external perspective, but from the big corporations, I feel it's very siloed in terms of the groups. If you take a company like Teva, just because we're smaller, right? We have less resources and we're smaller. You have a lot more connectivity between who all the decision makers are across all of the functions, and then clearly define where the roles and responsibilities lie, and you're working kind of hand in hand to execute on it. We were in the API division where I was, which is the powder that eventually becomes the drug. We just split, but we used to be one end-to-end unit. We worked completely hand in hand. So the leadership team was the R&D, it was the supply chain, it was myself leading commercial, it was the operations head. So we all it was like everyone together. How do we solve the problem, or how do we execute on this? How do we make sure we don't have a miss? So I think it's how you structure your processes.
I know that's helpful, and just to get the perspective on just scale too.
Yeah.
So
the smaller you go, I think the more work per individual it is, but the faster you can execute. That's been my experience. The bigger you become, the more like an elephant you become, right? And
right.
The challenge becomes, how do you keep the flexibility and agility and then leverage the size?
Awesome. Great question, Sean. Thank you. Next question. How do you turn it off and step away? Especially now that your office is home, how do you turn it off and step away?
So I'm very disciplined, and my turning it off is actually exercising every day. Every single day I make sure I exercise for usually about an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half of the day. My day is not complete unless I do that. And even when I was traveling a lot, I would land after like a 12-hour flight in Israel, and I would run 6 miles and then go to the shower and go to the office. So it sounds kind of crazy, I know, but that time is my time, and sometimes even when I run in silence, just because some of my best ideas come in that time. There's like no noise around me. The other thing that's really important to me as my turning off, but it's kind of turning on, I guess, in a different way, but it's my family, right? So it's dedicating that time to my kids primarily, my husband, to make sure that I'm there for them. I have to say, early in my career, I never turned it off. It was like I went and I went and I went. And I thought it was, really great. And I was over delivering and I was doing everything I needed to do. And I had a boss that told me along the way, you need to take like your vacation. You need to just stop. And he made me promise once to do it. And I did. I really shut down. I shut my computer off. I didn't check emails. And I came back so much more refreshed, and I was performing at such a higher level that I realized that downtime and forcing yourself to shut off is so important. It's hard when you're like an overachiever because you don't want to stop, and you think of all the things that aren't getting done while you're turning it off, but it's really important.
Absolutely. That is great advice. And I echo the importance of exercising. I start every day with jumping on the Peloton. I mean, that works for me. Mm-hmm. And I totally echo the importance of that. Find out what you love to do, whether it be running or yoga or Pilates or whatever. Just do something, and just so important.
Well, I do a mixture of either running or I do like a boot camp boxing. So when I'm really frustrated and I box, and it's like, I'm in my own zone, but I'm punching a bag thinking of all the things that I want to punch out of my situation, right?
That's great. That's great. Like I said, great advice. We have another question from Zoe. Zoe, can you turn the camera on? Thank you.
Hi. So earlier you mentioned that a really important part of a team is a good leader. So I wanted to ask you what you thought, what aspects of a leader makes them a good leader?
So I think there's a lot of different components to strong leadership, but probably, I don't want to say, there's a few things that are very important. There's the whole component of having strategic thinking capabilities and being a visionary and really being able to drive people in a direction, right? So that they feel like they're they want to follow you, right, in this direction. They believe in your cause, or they believe in the direction that you're moving in. But part of it is also having the ability to drive change, to engage people, to connect with people. And that's where the whole people component comes into it, where you are an active listener. You really are empathetic to what's going on in your team's lives, in their experiences. Early in my career, and I worked with an executive coach at the time on it, but it was really helping me to understand that, and this may sound kind of simple, but not everyone's the same, right? What drives you and how you think. What was happening with me is I'm an extremely fast thinker. So I was like 15 steps ahead of everyone else, and I couldn't understand why they weren't with me, because I wasn't taking the time to understand that they weren't processing the information as fast as me. And they would get intimidated because I was over here and they couldn't get there. They didn't even know where I was. So I couldn't get them to come with me, right? So I had to slow down, even though it's difficult for me, but I wasn't going to have the group with me, and we weren't going to be able to execute. The higher and higher you go and the bigger and bigger your team becomes, you're more and more dependent on how things roll down and all of those people following the direction that you're moving. The other thing that's important is collaboration, working together, really openness and authenticity, really creating an environment where you can have innovation. I believe in diversity. So I believe in having, I'm the only American on my leadership team. I mean, that may sound crazy, but like my head of Metis is a Korean lady who used to run the Australian office, who moved to Iceland, where we're headquartered, to run the business out of Iceland. So there's women, there's men, and there's all different ethnicities across my leadership team. But I think that brings a lot of diversity, right? And the other thing I think, or I like, as a leader, is to be challenged. I'm not one of those leaders that I just want yes men walking around me and telling me what I want to hear. I want to be challenged. I may not always agree, and I'll agree to disagree sometimes, but at least if people are challenging you, it's forcing you to think differently. So I think that's important also.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That was a great question and awesome answer. We kind of touched on this before when I asked you what makes a candidate stand out, but what do you look for when hiring your closest staff?
So a lot of what I think I just, mentioned in terms of strategic thinking capabilities, bringing diversity to the table, the ability to be creative and innovative. I feel that in business, you need to have your feet on the ground and be connected to the trends and what's going on in the market. But you have to be able to bring that back and then think differently, right? Because what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. And how do you learn from what worked yesterday, but then adjust to what you need for tomorrow? The ability to lead and motivate teams, it's really critical. The more you grow as a leader and your teams get bigger, you need to really keep them engaged and inspire them. You need to be able to empower people, right? Be able to delegate and give them the space. So you want to make sure that you're hiring people that aren't micromanagers and that have this ability to really give people their space and to help develop them. For me specifically, just because Teva's very complicated and it's a big company, they need to be able to work in a matrix, in a very complex environment. Big corporations, there's a lot of politics. So, for my leadership team, people that are able to manage in a political environment also, right? And be able to I call it like read the tea leaves of what's going on, the writing that isn't, that isn't actually written. So.
Absolutely. How many people report up to you, Kerri?
I think I have 10 direct reports right now. And then I have 2 indirect reports. I have a really great leadership team. So I took over as the head of global sales in 2015. I moved from the president of North America, where I really ran the end to end. And then I moved more into a sales center. And then they gave me customer experience, and then they gave me marketing, and then they gave me all the back integration to Teva. But through that, I really empowered and developed my team to form a very high performing team. And at the end of 2018, the CEO of Teva decided not to divest this Metis business. And they asked me to take it over and to fix it, right? To rebuild the foundation and transform the company. And I say the only reason I was able to add that whole other business onto my plate was because I could leave like Teva API running on its own because I had such a great leadership team there that I really trusted. And I knew they would alert me if, you know, if they need me for something, but I gave them like a lot of freedom and space and focused my efforts to Metis in 2019 and forward. So
that's great. Incredible. How do you prevent your team from falling behind the competition?
We believe that we're the leaders in the industry and we're always trying to stay in a leadership position, which means continuing to differentiate against your competitors. How do you do that? You need to see the trends. You need to understand the market needs of your customer base and, you know, of your offering and where are those opportunities. But you need to also continue to put yourself one step ahead. So if I look back on my career, like from 2000 to 2010, we focused a lot on intellectual property differentiation. There was a lot of value to it, and the market really paid for that value. As we moved forward into, you know, 2010 to today, let's say, we changed, and I think Sean mentioned it, right? We changed from a product-centric company to really become a customer-centric company. And we did that around 2017 because that was the next area. We focus on personalized and differentiated customer experience as a differentiation tool to really deliver on an optimal customer experience so that you increase the stickiness of your customer to you. And then you have more repeat customers. And we measure everything through surveys to make sure we're above expectations in terms of results, because that indicates from benchmarking, that indicates your stickiness. It's really important, even when you're a leader, to keep staying one with the trends and the times, to keep yourself ahead, right? Because you can very easily fall behind.
Great answer. Justin has a question. Justin, do you want to turn your camera on?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm actually on my lunch break at work. I work for Apple. But I had a question for you, Kerri. So it seemed like you wanted to go into the science side of things and then changed your mind and wanted to go into more of the management side. I actually was a journalist before I started my MBA, and now I want to go into management and marketing. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for people who are kind of having a change of heart towards their career, like post-education?
Well, I think you should always go with your gut and with your intuition and what your body is telling you, right, in terms of where you want to go, because ultimately you're going to be the most successful where you're happy. And if you're not happy in what you do, you're not going to deliver at the same level as you could without it. And don't get discouraged by it, right? Don't get discouraged by doing something new and different, because if your heart is with it, you will succeed. I had the science background, and I thought, you know, I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon. If you had asked me when I was, I don't know, 16, 17, 20 years old, I don't know, in college, that was what I wanted. And I was very interested in it early in my career. I wrote white papers with the orthopedist that I worked, that did my knee surgery at the time. And then I just realized that my heart wasn't with the patient, right? Like in that way, that I was going to be in school and I really wanted to be a doctor in the ORs. I realized it wasn't for me, but I said to myself, you know, this could be like a momentary blip, right? Still take your medical school entrance. I'd studied for them. I said, I'm still going to take them. I could change my mind in like 2 or 3 years and I'll just go back, right? I'm young. I can do what, you know, I can experiment and explore. And like I said, I ended up, through somebody I knew, getting this job. I said, you know, I want to keep the science, but I want to get into pharmaceuticals. And I ended up at Teva. And then I consider myself very fortunate because I had a lot of really, really great managers or bosses along the way, leaders that I worked for. I mean, they're almost all CEOs of companies now. So they saw my potential, they invested in me, they took the time, they developed me, they gave me the opportunities. It doesn't always happen, but I consider myself fortunate in that regard. Awesome. But just stay true to yourself.
Okay. Go ahead. Did you ever have to overcome any obstacles in like showing that your skills were transferable into another field at all?
I actually, not really, I guess I would say, because I've been with Teva for so long, I've grown within the company. So I've been, you know, able to prove myself, and people know my capabilities, and there's enough advocates internally. I would say, there's certain skills. If I was going out now and I wanted to move to a different industry, right? Because I believe at this stage in my career, I could, right? There's two things that are important. One is your learning agility. So if you have a high learning agility, in other words, you're able to learn things very quickly or fast enough, you can almost do anything. And then if you have with that the good leadership skills, like if I was reflecting on myself, where I feel like I've really proven myself as a leader, I think you can almost do anything, right? Like I can go into the food industry or I can go into a different industry. It's just a matter of learning the mechanics of that industry. And of course, having my own personal interest in that industry, right? So I think I wouldn't be discouraged by it at all. I would just, understand what the criteria are for the industry you want to move into. And I would also talk to people who are in that industry and understand what they see as challenges, how they can give you advice to help that transition.
Okay, thanks so much.
Networking is so critical. I feel like talking to people, you learn so much and you get so many insights that can really help you.
Absolutely. Can you expand on that and just talk to the students more about what they can do to network?
So I don't know if everybody is as nice as I am, but like when people reach out to me on LinkedIn, I generally accept them, unless it looks like a funny thing. But if people are asking me, like I told you that BC grad, she reached out to me, she wanted advice. I think, what's the worst that'll happen if you go on LinkedIn and you send somebody a message like, I'm interested, I'm just about to graduate with this degree and I'm really interested in getting in this industry. Like, you look like an expert in the industry. I'd love to take some time, if you have it, to speak to you, and hopefully they'll write back to you. I guess not everybody will, but some people should. The other thing is to look for, it's, I guess, a little bit hard now. Probably most things are being done virtually, but I would look for like networking events that different sub segments of the industry are having, right? That are relative to what you want to do or what you're trying to learn and understand. There's also different types of groups that you can become a part of. So there's a lot of women's networking groups, for example, which is something, I've looked at just because obviously I'm a woman, and, to really connect with women of all different industries to get different insights from them. It's one example. There's many different, groups that you can research and find and reach out to. And then of course, the easiest is really the people and the people they know, right? So it's really just talking to people and keeping those communication lines open. And one thing I can give as advice is through your career, no matter how frustrated you may be about a situation, don't ever burn a bridge, because you'll never, it feels like in the moment, like, oh, I'm never going to have to talk to this person again or whatever it may be. I can tell you, like in pharma, as big as pharma is, 21 years, it's all the same people, right? And part of my success has been that I do have a good reputation. I am authentic and people trust me because I've delivered on whatever I've committed to them as customers or whatever it may be. But the industry is really small, right? And every industry at the end of the day is small, and people appreciate good people and good relationships. So if you feel frustrated, just walk away. Don't burn the bridge.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
People you meet on the way up, you might also meet on the way down.
Yeah.
Very good advice. Professor T has a question. Professor T.
Hello, Kerri. Thank you for spending some time with our students. I wanted to ask what you think about the role of technology in the pharma industry. Now we are hearing AI, genome technology. We see some companies finding drugs at a much faster speed. Where do you see this going? What's your opinion on that?
I don't know if you heard the beginning part of Mary and my discussion on the vaccine, but I think that AI is doing a lot, and all this computational technology to really assess the best way to develop, a product with, low side effects, to be able to assess what exactly is going to happen in the drug of the body without actually having to do studies on patients, right? So you're eliminating a lot of the work that used to have to be done, trial and error, whether it be on animals and then on people. Furthermore, I think there is going to be a huge increase in gene therapies from what we can see, a significant increase in the biotechnology, the biologic products, and also biosimilar products as we move forward. I don't think it'll entirely replace small molecule technology, because you're going to need some population of that, but you will see a significant increase in biotech, and you see it happening now. Targeted therapies, where it's really delivering the drug to the right area of the body without all of the negative side effects that older drugs.
I'm hearing vaccines for cancer. Like, it just seems, I don't know if Moderna talks about those kind of things. And I
Let's talk about those things. Yes.
Yeah.
You heard Ryan Urban talking about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think there's so many advancements in technology, right? I mean, look at the speed of advancements of technology, digitally, right? All of that applies to all different industries, right? And it's a huge advantage in pharma, where you can try and really bring these targeted therapies and different types of therapies to the market faster and in a more safe and efficacious way. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alexander has a question. Alexander, can you turn your camera on?
Can you see me?
Hold on.
Oh.
Go ahead. Now, hold on. Now you can turn it on.
Well, there. All right. So my question was, what advice do you have for someone that wants to move into like a leadership role, or wants to be viewed in like a leadership way, but they're not in a leadership role, so they want to move from the non-leader to a leader?
Currently working in a company?
Yeah. So like you're in the company, and like that like you could be a good leader, or at least you got some ideas, but like you want to like gain a little more respect, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways that you can do that is really by asking your manager if there's any projects you can lead for them. Because once you become the leader of the project, and it's like, even if you can do a leadership role in a project with a cross collaborative group, and you really step up to lead that project, it enables people to see you in a different light. And as you're successful with that, more and more opportunities will come, because then you can also reference it. I led this really well. I could do another project. Oh, is there an opportunity for me to also lead people now, right? In a more official, capacity. So that's usually also how I've helped people to grow, is to give them project-based experience first, and then to transition them into leadership. You can also ask for the opportunity to mentor others. So where, you're onboarding people, or maybe there's somebody new to the company and you know the space better than they do, the internal network better than they do. Let me be their mentor. So I'm not officially their boss. I'm not officially responsible for leading them, but you're showing that you have that capability through a mentorship.
Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, I think you're a rock star, super overachiever, but have you ever failed? And what was that like?
Well, I mentioned before that it's really important to listen to your intuition. And I can tell you the times that I've ignored my intuition is when I haven't succeeded. I actually made a hire for a very critical role in my organization, and it was not my first choice. It was actually my third choice, but for a number of other reasons, we ended up with this third choice. And I convinced myself that it was going to be okay. And I saw warning signs from the organization, for almost a year. I ignored them all, right? Everything's going to be okay. I just need to invest more time. And I ended up in a really difficult situation, to the point where I needed, and here I go back to my amazing leadership team. the rest of my LT stepped up and everybody kind of took a piece of what happened with this one individual and triaged for me. Really, I felt like we were in a triage situation. We got on the phone the next morning. We kind of all were like, okay, we're divvying this up in this way. I have people all over the globe supporting me because it's virtual now. It works. We got fortunate with what's going on with COVID, you know, from a business standpoint in that respect. But it was really, it was one of those situations where I reflected back, sorry for the noise, I reflected back and I realized that if I had just listened to myself from the beginning, you know, and really my gut and my intuition, I probably would have made better decisions. And I was ignoring it along the way.
Thank you. What advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
What would I give myself?
21-year-old self. Your 21-year-old
my
self.
21-year-old self. So I had a really amazing boss along the way who I told you I'm a fast thinker. I do things very quickly. And I remember one day he said, Kerri, go home and sleep on it. Just make sure you come back tomorrow with the same plan. And I said, no, but Anant, I know what we need to do. This is what he said, Kerri, go home and sleep on it. And so if I had to give myself advice, that's what it would be. And I learned that if you're not forced to make a decision right there on the spot, and you do, sometimes you have to make a quick decision and you have to use the information that you have. But when you don't, take that time to really sleep on it. Like sometimes I just go for a run. I just take an extra hour. I say, you know, let me just think about it. And I go for a run and I gain that extra hour and I just think through, okay, it is right or it isn't right. 9 times out of 10, I come back to the same decision. Sometimes I don't, right? Sometimes I realize that there's a better way to do it or a different way to do it. And it also gives the opportunity sometimes to consult with other people and to get their opinions on it. But that would be my advice. Sleep on it.
That's good advice. Absolutely. And what's next? I see a Professor Wood in your future, but what's next?
So does my really good friend.
I do.
She said to me, you know, you can retire at some point soon, and then you could become get into academia. So I really enjoy being connected to the students, especially at this level, because I feel like there's a lot that I can offer, right, from my real life experiences. I think there's a lot great to learn theoretical, but it's also nice to connect to the practical and to be a resource from that perspective. But hopefully I'll be a CEO soon of a small company.
Yeah, and I have no doubt in that.
Not big. I want small.
And then someday, perhaps Professor Wood at FDU. That would be amazing.
Maybe. Yes, I could do that also. I really, you know, I don't know if this is a normal, you know, I guess everybody's different and they have their own individual, you know, what drives them. But as I've grown more and more in Teva, and I really appreciate everything at Teva and all of my experiences and the level that I've achieved in, you know, at a young age. I'm reporting to an individual, of course, the CEO of Teva, right? So I'm very high in the organization. I'm not like that kind of person though. I'm a more humble person. I don't think like that. But for me, I recognize with time how much I really value being able to influence and drive things and not being lost in a big sea of policies and decisions where, you know, I really want to drive results, right? And I want to be able to see the results and, you know, be able to influence decisions and be able to influence the direction and the vision. And I find that, you know, at least at this stage, I'm ready to do that on a smaller scale, not a big company.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. Well, any last minute questions, students? We have to be respectful of Kerri's time, but if any last minute questions, please type them in the chat or the Q&A. And did Professor T or Professor D'Amata have any questions? Feel free to ask them. Type in the chat and I'll promote you to a panelist.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So you said you were leading the sales for a while. How do you guys take the pulse of your customers? So whether it's about following the trends or their interest? Is there, like, in terms of your methodology, how do you study or try to understand them?
So I think there's a number of different inputs, and I mentioned it earlier. I still believe the human contact is the best input on measuring what's going on, but we also do a lot of other things. So we are doing surveys. We are asking for anonymous feedback. When we did the full customer centricity program, we actually worked with an external facilitator who spoke to our customers anonymously, gathered all the feedback, gave us that feedback in terms of where there were gaps in our processes, where there were new initiatives that they felt could add value. So there's the formal ways and the methodologies like surveying, and we have an online portal with our customers so we can track their activities. We're doing a lot more digitally. We still have a long way to go, but we're doing a lot more digitally where we can access behaviors of the customers. What kinds of things are they clicking on through the websites? When we do white papers, which ones are getting more interest than others? We do video blogs, what types of content are they more interested in than others? So we do compile all of that feedback, from a data perspective, to also see what's going on, the heartbeat of the customer and where their needs really are. I don't know if it's like I'm more traditional. I still like to just talk to people and hear what they're saying, what they feel, what they're going through. It just, for me, it gives you, the data is important, but that gives you something of the soft piece that you miss otherwise.
Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions? Professor D'Amata, anybody else? I think that's a wrap. You were fabulous. Thank you so much.
Well, it was really great. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'm available if anyone has any, questions you think of later, feel free. I
was going to ask, is it okay if the students connect with you on LinkedIn?
Sure. Some of them already have.
That's awesome. That's great.
I accepted a few today, so.
That's awesome. We've taught them well. Thank you so much again. And I'm going to have the pleasure of working with Kerri. She is on the Dean's Board of Advisors. So we're going to be seeing more of Kerri. Students, you can stay on.